Y'all, I have something very special to share with you today. You see, for a while now, my daughter has been doing guest spots on another spooky podcast, a show called Unspookable. It's a show for kids about ghost stories and things that go bump in the night, but done in a way for 8 to 13-year-olds, that sort of age range. She fell in love with the show, and just by the nature of making spooky content, I made friends with the producers, and of course, I guess you can call my kid a Nepo baby. Needless to say, because of that, I just co-produced an episode with Unspookable, a special kind of crossover episode about the Bell Witch for kids. And I actually did it with my daughter. So today I'm going to air that episode for you. I really hope you enjoy it. But if you have children of your own, I highly recommend going and checking out Unspookable. I didn't even know about this show. My 10-year-old found this herself and binged all of it. So, y'all, without further ado, here it is, Unspookable.
Hey, Unspookable listeners. Elise here with a special message for you and your grown-ups. This week, we have paired up with the team from a recent favorite podcast, Southern Gothic, a show about the dark history and infamous legends of the American South. Southern Gothic host and producer, Brandon Schexnayder, has become a good friend, and his telling of today's story is an all-time favorite. But, like many of the stories told on his podcast, it does lean towards the scarier side. As we've said before, if today's tale feels like it's too much, you know yourselves and how much spooky you can handle. If at any point things feel too scary for you, there is no shame in stopping the show. It will always be here for you should you decide to come back. The Unspookable and Southern Gothic teams wish you and yours a safe and joyous Halloween season. And now, on to the show.
Soundsington Media!
Father stands from his seat at the head of the table, signaling that dinner is officially over. He retreats to the fireplace to relax, and your brothers follow suit. But your work is far from over. You help your mother scrape any food scraps from the plates to feed to the animals later. Then you fill the wash basin with the water you collected earlier in the day and begin to scrub dishes with your mother's homemade soap. This is life on your family's farm in the bustling days of the 1820s. The air draws cool as the night deepens, and you can hear the boys adding wood to the cast iron stove. Truly a luxury in these parts, especially as we head into autumn. Then you hear something else, a knocking. But where is it coming from? It surely couldn't be a visitor. It's almost 7:30 p.m. Your father, always quick to receive visitors, swings open the door. But there's no one there. You hear it again, louder, more aggressive this time. Father grabs his Springfield rifle and steps out of doors to search out the source of this racket. You freeze, staring through the open door. Father reemerges in the doorway, shrugs, and simply mutters, "Must be critters." Just then, you feel a tickle crawl up your spine as you hear an airy whisper that almost sounds like the wind blowing through the corn crop. But this wind is clearly calling your name. Elizabeth. Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you're going to be late to school. You roll over, and as your eyes slowly unstick and begin to focus, you see your mom dramatically tapping her Apple Watch. Let's get a move on. What's going on, you think, as you look around your room? Backpack, tablet, Minecraft poster. But it all felt so real. You believed you were there. Believed something strange was calling out to you. Then you glance at your nightstand. an authenticated history of the famous Bell Witch, written by M.V. Ingram. You're slowly starting to put it all together. Your nighttime reading may have left more of an impression on your subconscious mind than you realized. I'm Elise Parisian.
And I'm Brandon Schexnayder.
And we're telling the tale of the Bell Witch, one of America's most famous ghost stories.
On this special crossover episode of Southern Gothic
and Unspookable. This week, we are thrilled to partner with Brandon Schexnayder of Southern Gothic to share the strange story of the Bell Witch, a story that, even if you're not familiar with the tale itself, you've likely encountered its haunting influence across popular culture. I'll let Brandon take it from here.
So the legend of the Bell Witch is an awful, wild story, and not only are there lots of twists and turns, but it has been so popular over the years that it's actually really hard to pin down a definitive version of the story, but let me go ahead and tell you the basics. In the early 1800s, a man named John Bell moved his family from North Carolina west to the brand new state of Tennessee, and he settled on the banks of the Red River. Today, that land is part of the city of Adams, a stone's throw from the Kentucky state line, but back when the Bells got there, this was untouched wilderness. On one hand, that meant there was plenty to offer settlers in the way of resources, fish to be caught in the streams, wild turkey and deer to hunt in the woods, but on the other hand, it also meant the family was pretty much out there all alone to fend for themselves if something bad happened. And I bet you know where this is going. Something bad happened, and y'all, that something has since become one of the most infamous ghost stories in the history of the United States. Well, it all started one day in 1817. John Bell was out working in the field when he encountered a strange-looking creature that seemed to have the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit. Shocked by the sight and likely a little scared, John grabbed his gun and fired a couple shots at it, but the animal just vanished right before his eyes. Well, as strange as that might have been, John had a lot of work on his plate that day, so he sort of just let it go and didn't think anything else of the encounter. That is, until after dinner that night when the family began hearing what sounded like knocking on the walls of their cabin. Surprised by the sudden disturbance, John and his sons jumped to their feet and hurried out to see if they could catch whoever it was doing the knocking, but when they got outside, no one was there. Now, at first, they probably just brushed it off, thinking whoever it was trying to mess with them had gotten away before they could catch him. But the next night, the same thing happened, and the mysterious sounds returned even louder and more forceful than they had before, a problem that continued over and over and over again each and every night thereafter. But still, this was only the beginning. Not long after that, the children started waking up in the middle of the night when their bed covers were being pulled off of them and their pillows tossed to the floor by something or someone that they couldn't even see. Something was definitely trying to torment this family, an entity of some kind, and the Bells had no idea who or what it was. That is, until one day, it made itself known through a faint whispering voice that they said sounded like a feeble old woman. Yet still, this was not the worst of it. The encounters continued to escalate and get worse over time, and the invisible entity that had been gradually tormenting them more and more over the last few weeks began singling out and targeting John and Lucy Bell's youngest daughter, Betsy. It pulled the poor girl's hair and physically attacked her, slapping the young woman with such force that it left welts and bruises on her body. And for that reason, John Bell felt he could no longer sit back and let this continue. This was his daughter, after all. So finally, he swallowed his pride and confided in his dear friend, James Johnston. Of course, as you might expect, James thought John was out of his mind, and who could blame him, right? How would you feel if your best friend came over one day and told you an invisible entity was attacking their family? You might be skeptical as well, but John convinced James and his wife to spend the night in their cabin and see for themselves. An agreement that I guarantee the Johnstons regretted, because what started out as a pleasant evening went south awful fast as the couple found out firsthand that John Bell was not trying to pull their leg after all. The next day, James told his friend John, "This entity is evil. You can't deal with this alone." Well, John agreed, and soon enough, word of the strange stuff going on over at the Bell family farm started spreading through town. But the more folks talked about it, the more powerful the entity seemed to become. Its voice strengthened over time and began clearly echoing through the home. It sang hymns, quoted scripture, carried on intelligent conversations, and, of course, continued to torment the Bell family. By 1819, word of the strange happenings had grown so far and wide throughout the state that the then Major General Andrew Jackson, you know, the man who would one day become president, well, he decided he was going to head out up to the Bell family farm from his own home down in Nashville and personally investigate what was going on there. But when Jackson and his companions arrived at the farm, their horses came to a sudden stop right at the edge of the property, and the wagon they pulled behind them seemed to be stuck in the mud, even though it wasn't. The men tried to push the animals forward to pull the wagon and move it, but again, they just couldn't. It was like something or someone invisible had just taken over. Obviously, this was pretty frustrating, and after spending more time than he cared to trying to deal with it, Jackson finally shouted, exasperated, "By the Eternal, boys, that must be the Bell Witch." And to their horror, the entity responded. It told them they could proceed, but not to worry, she'd see him again real soon. That night, Jackson and his men pitched tents on the property, but after the sun set, the witch kept her promise. She physically assaulted the men and tormented them just like she had Betsy Bell until they couldn't take it anymore and begged the Major General to leave the property. Supposedly, years later, when folks asked President Jackson about what happened that night, he said simply, "I'd rather fight the British at New Orleans than fight the Bell Witch." Over the following year, the witch continued its torment of the Bell family until eventually it began threatening to take the life of John Bell himself, who amidst all of this awful stuff going on in his home was already struggling with his health. For some reason, the entity had an axe to grind with the farmer, and she promised this would not end well for him. Y'all, it didn't. On the morning of December 20th, 1820, John Bell passed away. His family was heartbroken, but later that day they found something incredibly suspicious in their cabin. In the cupboard was a vial filled with a strange black liquid, a poison that no doubt had been given to their beloved father, stealing his life from him. And how did they know that was the case, that mysterious bottle was the cause? Because when they found the vial, the entity's voice echoed through the cabin, laughing and boasting. "I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night, which fixed him." In shock, they tossed the vial into the fireplace, scared of what might happen next, and as soon as it shattered on the burning logs, the liquid burst into a bright blue flame that shot up the chimney and into the night sky. Now today, if you're brave enough, you can actually go visit the property where the Bell family once lived on the Red River. It's about 45 miles north of Nashville. There, you can tour a recreation of the old cabin that the Bell family once lived in and see what life would have been like for them back in the early 19th century. But most of all, the part that draws most folks out there is the cave where many believe the spirit of the Bell Witch retreated to for sanctuary after the death of John. Pretty spooky, right? Well, that's not all when it comes to the cave, though, because according to local lore, people who visit the cave and dare take a rock or any other item with them from the cave are exposing themselves to the possibility of a curse. That curse might come in the form of just sheer bad luck or sometimes even illness or injury. One story I heard was of a couple who took a rock from the cave floor and ended up getting into a horrible car accident right after they left, less than 2 miles away from the Bell family farm. Now, is that true or not? Well, that's totally up to you to decide, but if you do happen to visit, when you enter the cabin to purchase your ticket, notice all the letters on the wall and read a couple. Hardly a day goes by without the folks who run the Bell Witch Cave tours receiving a rock in the mail with a note from someone, hoping that by returning it to the cave, maybe, just maybe, the curse of the Bell Witch will be lifted.
More after this.
All right, so we have just seen our first sign for the Bell Witch Cave as we're pulling up here. So we're going to pull up in a momentarily. Are you nervous?
No,
What are you thinking?
I don't know.
Historic Bell Witch Cave, half a mile. Here we go.
Yeah. Really doing this. Cool.
Really doing this.
Yeah, doing it.
All right, we're about to turn in. Here we go. We're here.
That's
Historic Bell Witch Cave.
weird. Gosh, so weird.
Pull it up.
Ugh.
Here we are.
Why? I regret this a little.
Why do you regret it?
I don't know.
Is it because you're nervous?
Yeah.
You are a little
know.
nervous?
I don't know.
You don't know what to expect.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a cave.
Well, that's the cabin there. We're going to go in the cabin. Nothing looks scary, right?
No, I don't want
All right, well, let's go.
to. No, I'm staying here.
Here we go.
You can go through the cave. I'm staying in.
Brandon and his daughter Blythe traveled to Adams, Tennessee to see the Bell Witch Cave, now a popular tourist attraction, for themselves. We'll check back in with them in a bit to see what they discover. So, on Unspookable, we love a good ghost story and think you can have fun with them regardless of whether or not you believe. But why do so many believe? As we've talked about before on Unspookable, the human brain is wired to seek answers as to why things happen. When we can't explain something right away, it can make us feel anxious or even physically uncomfortable. Our brains can interpret this lack of understanding as a potential threat, which activates our fight or flight response. It's our body's way of telling us that we need to resolve the situation to feel safe. In some cases, where we have been previously exposed to the idea of paranormal or supernatural phenomena, making this leap is the quickest way to ease our bodies and minds. Do you remember our opening and how Elizabeth dreamed of a historical ghostly encounter after reading a book about the Bell Witch haunting? Studies, like one done at Purdue University in 2001, have found that exposure to media about the paranormal can lead to greater belief in paranormal phenomena. Purdue communication professor Glenn Sparks reported, "We can't make a definitive conclusion that paranormal shows actually cause an increase in belief because it could be that those who believe in the paranormal are more likely to watch those kinds of programs. But in laboratory experiments conducted on this topic, exposure to paranormal depictions does increase paranormal belief. Our findings are certainly consistent with other experimental research that indicates media messages about the paranormal do influence beliefs." In the case of the Bell Witch, the primary source of media is An Authenticated History of the Famous Bell Witch, written by Martin Van Buren Ingram and published in 1894. This was nearly 75 years after the reported haunting events, where every person with firsthand knowledge had long since passed. And the work has been repeatedly questioned due to its falsified and unverified sources. But that hasn't lessened our interest in the slightest. There have been loads of books and multiple films, including Bell Witch Haunting in 2004, An American Haunting in 2005, and Bell Witch the Movie in 2007, all based upon the story. And the widely popular The Blair Witch Project series is said to be inspired in part by the legend. So, maybe the question is less, do we believe? And more, why do we want to believe? Although the reasons can vary geographically, almost every culture around the globe believes in ghosts. For some, it may ease the fear of mortality. The existence of ghosts may show that not only does the soul exist, but that it can live on. This also means that we can access lost loved ones, maybe even our favorite pets in the afterlife. We may even find comfort in the existence of hauntings, as in many of these stories, the hauntings exist to right a wrong, prevent a future tragedy, or seek justice for an unethical deed. Dr. Elizabeth Libby Tucker from Binghamton State University, who you may remember from our episode on Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board, gives the example of many of the reported sightings on university campuses are often tied to sordid aspects of the campus's past. But maybe the biggest reason? It's just more fun to believe. Dressing up as a ghost, watching spooky movies and podcasts, and visiting haunted houses are a staple of American Halloween tradition. In Tennessee, the legend of the Bell Witch is a source of pride, often taught in schools and serving as an enormous part of the haunted tourism industry. We may try and show the science of scares here on Unspookable and have a critical eye of the things that go bump in the night, but we're never opposed to having a little fun. And speaking of which, let's see if Brandon and Blythe had any fun at the Bell Witch Cave.
All right, so what did we just do?
We went to the Bell Witch Cave.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So tell me about it. What was it like?
So first off, we went to a recreation of the Bell family cabin, kind of. And they told us about the history and about the family. And then we went into the cave. It was really cool. It was really rocky. It felt like mountain hiking, but in the dark and wet. But the history also was super cool to learn about, and I feel like it was just so fun.
So was it as scary as you thought it would be?
I didn't think it was going to be scary, but I just was not going to like it because, I mean, it's literally just hiking through a cave, but it was actually super fun to do, and I think it was definitely super fun.
So what did the tour guide tell us about how it's haunted, some of the things that happened?
Well, it was talking about, I don't know.
What did he say? He said people hear their name whispered.
Yeah, people would hear their name whispered. A couple people saw stuff. And there was a and it said that there was a Native American burial ground above the cave.
Did you steal a rock from the cave?
I stole a rock from the cave. It was a really big one. But it said that if you steal a rock from the cave, then you'll get like haunted or like bad luck.
Are you worried that you're going to get bad luck now?
No, I'm not worried. I think the rock's really cool though because it's from the Bell Witch Cave.
Was that a good first haunted place to visit?
Yeah, it was great.
Thanks for listening to this co-presentation of Southern Gothic and Unspookable. Hosted by Elise Parisian and Brandon Schexnayder. Written by Nate DuFort and Brandon Schexnayder. Produced and edited by Nate DuFort. Our theme song and additional music composed by Jesse Case. Our logo was created by Natalie Khuen. And a huge special thanks this week to Blythe. We are lucky to have made such good friends with Brandon, and we absolutely adore Southern Gothic and recommend it to adults and to our older listeners. If you enjoy the show, make sure to tell your friends. You can leave us a rating and review in your podcast player of choice, or share an episode on social media. Speaking of social media, you can find Unspookable on Instagram and on TikTok. Unspookable is a production of Soundsington Media, committed to making quality programming for young audiences and the young at heart. For more information on our shows and the people behind them, go to www.soundsingtonmedia.com.